What if a warrior from humanity's darkest future crashed into our present day, carrying with him the terrible knowledge that our destiny among the stars was never meant to be kind? What if we discovered that survival in the cosmos demands transformation into something we might not recognize, something simultaneously glorious and monstrous? What if the price of humanity's continuation across the millennia was the very humanity we cherish most? The morning sky over Manhattan tore open like flesh beneath a blade. It wasn't gradual. There was no warning, no cosmic fanfare. One moment, morning commuters rushed through Times Square clutching coffee cups and scrolling through phones. The next, reality itself screamed. The air didn't just shimmer, it bled. A crimson wound split the heavens, vast and pulsing, rimmed with light that hurt to perceive. It was the color of catastrophe, of things fundamentally wrong with the universe. Car alarms triggered spontaneously. Glass in nearby buildings developed stress fractures. People dropped to their knees, hands pressed against ears that registered pressure waves beyond sound, vibrations that resonated in bone marrow and made teeth ache with sympathetic frequency. Through this cosmic laceration, something fell, not like a meteor, all mindless momentum and burning trajectory. This descent was different, almost controlled, as though whatever plummeted toward Earth was fighting its fall even as gravity claimed it. The shape was massive, humanoid but wrong in its proportions, trailing ethereal flames that weren't quite fire, energy that existed in colors the human eye wasn't designed to process. When it struck the pavement of Times Square, the impact registered on seismographs 3 states away. The crater it left was perfectly circular, 12 feet across, ringed with glass, turned to liquid and re-solidified in frozen waves. And at the center, steam rising from superheated armor, stood something that looked almost human. Almost. He rose slowly, each movement accompanied by the hiss of hydraulics and the whir of servo motors. 8 feet of ceramite armor, painted the deep blue of Earth's oceans, seen from space, scarred by wars no human had ever witnessed. On his left shoulder guard, a golden inverted omega. On his right, a skull cradled within a mechanical cog. The armor's surface told stories in the language of battle damage, last burn scoring, impact craters from weapons that wouldn't be invented for 40,000 years, the mark of claws that belonged to things that shouldn't exist. His helmet turned with mechanical precision, the single red lens sweeping across the gathering crowd. Emergency responders were already approaching, their training overriding the primal urge to flee. The giant's gauntleted hand moved to the weapon mag-locked to his thigh, a gun too large for any normal human to lift, let alone fire. When he spoke, the voice didn't just fill the air. It resonated in chest cavities, made windows vibrate in their frames, bypassed ears to impress itself directly upon consciousness. The helmet's voxcasters amplified words in a language that was almost English, almost recognizable. Gothic filtered through 10 millennia of linguistic evolution. Identify this world. In the name of the God Emperor of mankind, declare your allegiance or be judged. The world stopped, not metaphorically. For 3 seconds, Times Square, the perpetual heart of human activity, fell absolutely silent. Then panic erupted like a breaking wave. Lieutenant Colonel Marcus Reed watched the footage for the 7th time, studying details that became no less impossible with repetition. The secure briefing room beneath Fort Detrick smelled of recycled air and cold coffee. General Harris stood beside the display, his face carved from granite and bad news. We're calling him Brother Titus, Ultramarines Chapter, 2nd Company. That's what he claims, anyway. Reed couldn't look away from those eyes on the screen. They'd removed the giant's helmet for medical assessment, revealing a face that belonged in Renaissance paintings of angels, if those angels had been engineered for murder. Too symmetrical, too perfect. The bone structure was human but exaggerated, refined, as though evolution had been given a destination and forced to reach it. What are we dealing with? Reed asked, though part of him didn't want to know. Dr. Eliza Chen stepped forward, tablet glowing, with data that defied conventional biology. Genetically, he's human, but modified at a level that makes CRISPR look like kindergarten scissors. He has 3 lungs, 2 hearts, organs we can't even identify. His bones are reinforced with ceramic compounds that shouldn't exist naturally. His muscle density is approximately 4 times normal human parameters. We took a small tissue sample, and the cells, they repair themselves. We watched them knit together under the microscope in real time. Harris grunted. And the religious angle? Chen's expression grew troubled. Extensive. He worshipped something called the Emperor of Mankind, with absolute conviction. Claims to be from the 41st millennium, part of a galaxy-spanning empire at war, with threats we don't have names for. Aliens, demons, things from dimensions beyond our physics. His worldview is troubling. All aliens are enemies to be exterminated. Mutation is heresy worthy of death, and humans like us, he calls us baseline, unaugmented, almost with pity. Reed understood why they'd called him. 3 combat tours, psychological evaluations that showed high adaptability, linguistic aptitude that helped him work with coalition forces speaking a dozen languages. They needed someone who could talk to a warrior monk from a nightmare future. Someone who spoke the universal language of soldiers. When do I meet him? He asked. Now, Harris replied. And Colonel? Be careful. He's cooperating because he chooses to. We've run simulations. If he wanted to leave, we couldn't stop him. The containment chamber had been built to test experimental weapons. Its walls were reinforced concrete laced with steel mesh, designed to contain explosions. Reed doubted they would contain the giant if he truly decided to leave. Titus stood when Reed entered, a fluid motion that made the massive armor seem weightless. Up close, he was overwhelming. Not just his size, though that was considerable. It was presence, the weight of absolute certainty, of faith tested in fires Reed couldn't imagine. Lieutenant Colonel Marcus Reed, United States Army. Reed introduced himself, fighting every instinct that screamed to maintain distance from this apex predator wearing human skin. Brother Titus Valyrian, 2nd Company, 5th Tactical Squad, Ultramarines Chapter, Adeptus Astartes. The words were formal, ritual. You command warriors, not a question. I do. Then we may speak as brothers, though you are unaugmented and your warriors are, forgive me, primitives by the standards of my time. They sat, Reed in a standard chair, Titus in something hastily constructed from reinforced steel that groaned under the weight of his armor. For an hour, Titus spoke, and Reed's understanding of humanity's potential future crystallized into nightmare. The giant described a galaxy where humanity clung to existence through faith and firepower, where entire worlds burned to deny them to enemies, where soldiers fought and died in numbers that made Earth's entire population seem like a rounding error. He spoke of the God Emperor, a being of such psychic power that he held back literal demons while guiding humanity across the stars. He spoke of the Adeptus Astartes, the Space Marines, humanity's angels of death, genetically enhanced warriors, who knew no fear and gave no mercy. And he spoke with the calm certainty of someone describing simple facts, not opinions or beliefs. Your world puzzles me, Titus said, his enhanced eyes studying Reed with unsettling intensity. I see no void shields, no orbital defense platforms, no evidence of threats beyond your atmosphere. How do you survive? We don't face extraterrestrial threats, Reed explained. Our wars are with each other, nation against nation, ideology against ideology. Something like sorrow crossed the Space Marine's perfect features. Then you are children fighting over toys while the wolf circles your crib, unseen. There are horrors in the void that would consume your world in days if they knew you existed. You are fortunate to live in ignorance. Or maybe, Reed suggested carefully, those horrors don't exist in our reality. Maybe your future is just one possibility, not inevitability. Titus was silent for a long moment. When he spoke again, his voice was softer, almost gentle. I pray to the Emperor that you are correct, Lieutenant Colonel, because if you are not, if my timeline is your destiny, then your species has barely begun to taste suffering. Everything you are, everything you value, will be sacrificed on the altar of survival. And the tragedy is that this will be necessary. This will be the only way forward. The weight of those words hung between them like a physical presence. Reed understood then what truly frightened him about Titus. Not the physical threat, the superhuman strength or advanced technology. It was the mirror the Space Marine held up to humanity, showing them what they might become when survival demanded transformation into monsters. 3 weeks passed. Titus cooperated with testing, allowed observations, and shared tactical doctrine with military officials who struggled to comprehend warfare on his scale. But tensions were rising. The Chinese and Russians had detected the energy signature of his arrival. Questions were being asked in the UN Security Council. Conspiracy theorists on the internet were assembling fragments of truth into theories that, while wild, were dangerously close to reality. And then the facility was breached. Reed was in the observation room with Dr. Chen when alarms shrieked through the complex. Explosions echoed from the main entrance. Gunfire, screams, the distinctive thump of flashbangs. Security breach. The automated system announced with mechanical calm. Unauthorized entry at multiple points. Lockdown initiated. Reed drew his sidearm and started for the door, but Chen grabbed his arm. "Titus," she said, pointing at the containment chamber monitor. The Space Marine stood motionless, head tilted, listening to sounds far beyond normal human hearing. Then he moved. His fist struck the reinforced door once. Metal shrieked. A second impact tore it from its moorings entirely. "He's loose," Reed said, then corrected himself. No, he was never actually contained. He was waiting. They found him in the corridor, standing over the bodies of 3 intruders dressed in unmarked tactical gear. Titus had torn through them with bare hands, his enhanced body more than sufficient without armor. Blood covered his pale skin, none of it his own. His cobalt eyes found Reed. "Your facility is under attack. Mercenaries, not military. Someone wants what you found in me." "You killed them," Reed said. Unnecessary observation filling the space where processing should happen. "They threatened an imperial servant," Titus replied, with the matter-of-fact tone of someone discussing weather. "The response is authorized under Codex Astartes doctrine. These are enemies of mankind." More explosions shook the facility. Titus's head snapped toward the sound with predatory focus. "They target the research wing, where my armor is held." He looked at Reed, and there was something in his expression that might have been anticipation. "Take me there, Lieutenant Colonel. I would show you what I truly am when properly equipped." The path to the research wing was painted in violence. Bodies of security personnel, precise breaches in secured doors, the hallmarks of a well-planned operation by professionals with inside knowledge. Titus moved ahead of Reed, still unarmored but no less deadly. When they encountered the intruders, 6 men with automatic weapons in a defensive position, Titus didn't slow. Bullets tore into his enhanced flesh, punching through muscle that was denser than Kevlar, ricocheting off bones reinforced with ceramic compound. He bled, but didn't stop. What followed wasn't combat. It was a lesson in why humans had engineered creatures like Titus in the first place. He moved through the gunfire like water, flowing around obstacles, using the environment with tactical brilliance earned across centuries. Within 20 seconds, all 6 intruders were dead or dying. "Your weapons are insufficient," Titus observed, blood streaming from a dozen wounds that were already clotting with unnatural speed. "In my time, even civilian weapons would pierce my skin easily. You are fortunate I come from a more dangerous age, where survival demanded more robust engineering." They reached the research wing to find chaos. The intruders had breached the chamber containing Titus's armor and were attempting to extract it. The Space Marine's expression, previously calm even in violence, transformed into cold fury. "They dare profane sacred war gear. They will die for this sacrilege." What Reed witnessed next would haunt him forever. Titus, still unarmored and bleeding from multiple wounds, tore through the remaining intruders with methodical precision. Then he approached his armor with reverence, usually reserved for religious relics. The ceremony of donning it was mesmerizing. Each piece locked into place with practiced ease, power systems engaging with rising hums, the machine spirit, as Titus called it, awakening from dormancy. When the helmet finally sealed, the transformation was complete. No longer a man, even an enhanced one. A weapon. A walking apocalypse encased in blue ceramite and absolute faith. "Now," the amplified voice resonated through the chamber, "we end this." But as they prepared to secure the facility, alarms changed tone. A computerized voice announced with bureaucratic calm that made the words more terrifying. "Biohazard breach. Sector 7 compromised. Genetic material containment failure. Evacuation recommended." Reed felt ice settle in his stomach. Sector 7 housed the biological samples taken from Titus, including his blood. Chen had warned that the genetic material was unstable, designed for controlled implantation into prepared subjects. Exposure to unprepared humans could cause catastrophic mutation. They didn't just want your armor, Reed said. They wanted you, your DNA. Titus was already moving. Then they have doomed themselves and possibly everyone in this facility. My gene seed is sacred, the Emperor's gift to his chosen warriors. Without proper preparation, without the rites and conditioning, it becomes poison, corrupting instead of enhancing. We must reach the source and destroy it before the contamination spreads. The journey to Sector 7 revealed the catastrophe in stages. First, security personnel with blackened veins visible beneath their skin, convulsing as their bodies tried to process genetic information meant for different biology. Then worse, researchers whose transformation had progressed further, bones elongating, additional limbs budding from torsos, mouths splitting to accommodate too many teeth. They moved with jerky aggression. Human consciousness drowned beneath waves of corrupted genetic instruction. Titus dispatched each with grim efficiency, each kill accompanied by prayers in High Gothic. They were innocents, he said after ending what had once been a lab technician. Their suffering is on my hands. I should have ensured total destruction of all samples. You couldn't have known, Reed said, though the words felt hollow. I am Adeptus Astartes. Knowing is my duty. Preparedness is my creed. I failed these people by underestimating your world's capacity for foolishness. They reached Sector 7 to find it transformed into organic horror. The clean room had become a womb for nightmares. And at the center, fed by the spilled genetic material, something that might once have been multiple people had fused into a single entity. It towered even over Titus, a grotesque amalgamation of human bodies attempting to achieve the enhancement they'd been exposed to. But without the template, the guidance, the sacred rites that made Space Marines instead of monsters. It spoke, mouths working in hideous unison, voices overlapping into harmony that shouldn't exist. Father, template, progenitor, we become like you. We evolve, we transcend. You are abomination, Titus responded, his voice carrying the weight of absolute judgment. And you will be cleansed. The battle that followed was primal and terrible. Titus fought with every weapon available, his armor systems pushed to limits, against an enemy that grew and adapted with each passing moment. Fed by corrupted genetic imperatives, Reed provided what support he could, but knew he was witness more than participant in this clash between transhuman warrior and post-human horror. In the end, Titus stood victorious, but at cost. His armor was breached in multiple locations, power systems failing, hydraulics leaking, and the source of contamination remained. The cryo units containing the primary samples, intact and continuing to leak their mutagenic payload. I need your weapon, Titus said to Reed. His voice strained even through the helmet's amplification. Reed handed over his sidearm, knowing it was inadequate. Titus examined it briefly, then set it aside. Instead, he began removing his armor's power core, the miniaturized reactor that had sustained the suit's systems for what might have been centuries. This will be sufficient, he said with terrible calm. The detonation will sterilize this entire sector. Nothing will survive, not the samples, not the contamination, not, he paused, not me. No, Reed said, understanding but refusing to accept. We can find another way. We can evacuate and seal the sector. And risk even a single corrupted cell escaping? Risk this abomination spreading beyond these walls? Titus removed his helmet one final time. His face was serene, resolved. I have lived over 2 centuries, Lieutenant Colonel. I have fought in campaigns across 100 worlds. I have held the line against enemies you cannot comprehend. If my existence ends here, ensuring that this corruption dies with me, then it is a worthy death. More than that, it is my duty. Your world is not ready for what I represent, Titus continued, his voice gentle despite the horror surrounding them. Not the technology, not the genetic engineering, and especially not the faith. You still believe in choice, in individual human worth. in the sanctity of the soul untouched by modification. Those are luxuries my time cannot afford. But perhaps here, in your age, they are still possible. Perhaps you can forge a different future, one where humanity survives without becoming what I am. He placed a massive hand on Reed's shoulder, the gesture almost fatherly despite the Baroque nightmare of the setting. Tell your leaders what you witnessed here. Tell them that power without wisdom is corruption, that enhancement without ethics is damnation. My Imperium forgot those lessons, sacrificed them for survival. Maybe yours can remember. Then he pushed Reed toward the exit with enough force to send him stumbling. Go, brother. Remember that we met as warriors and part as brothers despite the millennia between us. Reed ran, hearing behind him the rising whine of the power core as its containment was systematically breached. He was 3 corridors away when the detonation turned Sector 7 and much of the surrounding facility into vapor and slag. The heat wave that followed caught him, hurling him forward into unconsciousness. When he woke in a hospital bed 3 days later, the official story was already in place. Industrial accident. Chemical explosion. Tragic but contained. The truth was classified at levels that barely existed, distributed to a handful of individuals who would carry the knowledge as burden and warning. Months passed. Reed took command of Project Astartes, the code name chosen with deliberate irony, an initiative to study what had been learned and prepare humanity for possibilities, both wondrous and terrible. Not to replicate what Titus had been, that path led to the horrors they'd witnessed, but to understand, to prepare, to perhaps forge a different road to the stars than the one paved with faith and fanaticism. Yet even as he worked, Reed became aware of ripples spreading from the incident. A Chinese research facility announced breakthroughs in metallurgy that suspiciously resembled ceramite properties. Russian defense contractors filed patents on power systems based on theoretical principles that matched fragments recovered from the site. The genie was escaping its bottle, knowledge dispersing across the globe in pieces too small to be fully dangerous alone, but collectively pushing humanity toward something. Dr. Chen, in her private laboratory, studied the single blood sample she'd preserved, officially destroyed but secretly maintained. She told herself it was for research, for understanding, for preparation. But late at night, she wondered if she was planting seeds of the very future Titus had warned against. In Brooklyn, a conspiracy theorist named Sam uploaded his final video on the incident, stitching together eyewitness accounts and leaked documents into a narrative that was wildly speculative yet uncomfortably close to truth. His followers grew, spreading theories that would eventually coalesce into something resembling faith. And in the Vatican's secret archives, a committee of theologians studied transcripts of Titus's statements, finding in them echoes of prophecy, kernels of eschatological truth wrapped in the language of war. They debated whether the God Emperor was Christ returning in glory or the Antichrist wearing humanity's face, never realizing they were laying groundwork for the imperial creed itself. Far above, beyond Earth's atmosphere, in dimensions humans couldn't perceive, ancient things took notice. The rift had been brief but significant, a temporal anomaly that shouldn't have occurred. The great game that played across eternity had new pieces on the board, and the players, vast and terrible and utterly inhuman, began to take interest in this small blue world that had briefly touched a dark future. Humanity remained unaware, going about their daily lives, but in their dreams and whispers and intuitions, new fears were breeding, new questions were being asked. What if we're not alone? What if survival demands transformation? What if the price of existence among the stars is the loss of everything that makes us human? Reed stood in his office late one night, looking at the classified files that would consume the rest of his life. Titus Valyrian had been both warning and weapon, both guardian and harbinger. In saving them from immediate contamination, he'd infected them with something perhaps more dangerous: knowledge. The knowledge that humanity's current form might be insufficient for the cosmos. That survival might demand sacrifice of ideals, transformation of flesh, devotion to doctrines that would seem like fanaticism by today's standards. The real question, the one that kept Reed awake through countless nights, was whether humanity would learn the right lessons. Would they see Titus as a cautionary tale about the dangers of going too far, or as a template for necessary evolution, a glimpse of what they must become? Only time would tell. And time, Reed had learned, was more fluid than anyone suspected. The future was not fixed. It could be changed, shaped, avoided, or perhaps inevitably embraced. Brother Titus Valyrian had lived and died believing in the God Emperor, in eternal war, in human supremacy maintained through genetic modification and absolute faith. His presence in their time had been accident or design, cosmic coincidence or deliberate warning. But the seeds were planted now, growing in soil prepared by fear and wonder, and the uniquely human drive to reach beyond current limitations. The stars waited in silence, neither judging nor caring about humanity's internal debates. They held horrors Titus had described and possibly worse. Or they held nothing, empty and indifferent to humanity's dreams and nightmares alike. Discovering which was true would require reaching out, taking steps beyond Earth's cradle. And when humanity finally did, Reed wondered what face they would wear. Would they go as explorers, as diplomats, as scientists seeking knowledge? Or would they go as the Adeptus Astartes did, as warriors knowing no fear, carrying faith and firepower into the darkness, transformed into something that could survive in a hostile universe? The choice, for now, remained open. The future was not written, despite Titus's presence suggesting otherwise. But every decision made, every technology pursued, every compromise with human nature accepted in the name of security or advancement, was a step down one path or another. And somewhere, in the genetic memory humanity didn't know they possessed, in the collective unconscious that transcended individual awareness, the image of Brother Titus Valyrian remained. A warrior monk 8 feet tall in blue armor, standing against darkness with absolute faith, representing both humanity's potential salvation and its possible damnation. The question wasn't whether humanity would change. Change was inevitable. The question was whether that change would be chosen consciously, with wisdom and ethics intact, or forced upon them by circumstance until they no longer recognized themselves, until they became like Titus, necessary and terrible, and absolutely certain of their righteousness, even as they committed acts their ancestors would have called monstrous. The future was coming. It fell from the sky in crimson light. It stood 8 feet tall and called humanity children. It showed them horrors born from their own DNA, corrupted by arrogance. And it died to save them, sacrificing itself in an act of devotion to an emperor who wouldn't be born for millennia. Brother Titus Valyrian was gone, but his shadow stretched across humanity's potential timelines, dark and long and inescapable. The only question that remained was whether humanity would walk into that shadow willingly, seeing it as necessary preparation for cosmic survival, or fight to forge a different path, maintaining their humanity even if it meant accepting limitations, accepting vulnerability, accepting that some transformations cost more than they offer. Reed closed the classified files and locked them away. Tomorrow he would continue the work, walking the knife's edge between preparation and corruption, between wisdom and arrogance. But tonight, he simply stood at his window, looking at stars that suddenly seemed less welcoming than they had before. One of humanity's potential children fell from the future to warn them. Or perhaps it wasn't a warning. Perhaps it was an invitation, a challenge, a promise of what they could become if they were willing to pay the price. The God Emperor didn't exist yet. The Imperium was millennia away. The Age of Strife and the Great Crusade and the Horus Heresy were distant possibilities, not inevitabilities. But the seeds were planted, watered with blood and faith and the terrible knowledge that survival might demand becoming monsters. And in the darkness of space, in dimensions beyond human perception, in the future that might be, something watched and waited, patient as the stars themselves, to see what humanity would choose.